This is a clip from Forbidden Knowledge NewsCon 2022. To access this entire presentation and every presentation from the conference, just click the link in the description or go to rokfin.com/FKN+.
Hello, all of you Rokfin lunatics. Thank you so much for joining us for the Forbidden Knowledge News Conference. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you to Chris, Corey, everybody at the team at Forbidden Knowledge News for inviting me back. If you are interested, my show, Macroaggressions, is available on Rokfin. You can subscribe to it whenever. And my group show, The Union of the Unwanted, is available here, as well as Day Zero. So we are branching out to try and get you as much information about all this insanity as we can. So when we discussed this, when Chris and Corey and I talked about the ideas for my topic for this conference, well, I really felt like we could go a couple different ways with this, but one of the most important things that I think right now is the role of the World Economic Forum. It's a term that a lot of people didn't know about. They might have heard, passing on television that private jets from around the world have descended on Davos in January for this meeting of all these economic and very well-connected individuals that are getting together to discuss, unicorns and rainbows and charities and green new deals and all that stuff, all this stuff. They're going to go save the world, don't you know? Right. So you might have heard of them. And you probably didn't think much of it, except that you didn't get a ticket. You didn't have to spend $20-something thousand to go to Davos, or $250,000 or whatever it costs. And you probably didn't care, because who wants to hang out with these people anyway? But let me tell you something. You might want to be paying attention to who they are and what they're doing, because these people have an undue amount of influence in this world, and they intend to use it. So where I wanted to start with this, or where I want, really the whole concept behind this talk, is that the World Economic Forum's big push is for the fourth industrial revolution. And I think it is reasonable to ask the question, are they seeking the fourth industrial revolution, or are they seeking to build the Fourth Reich? Now, before you roll your eyes and say, get out of here with that stuff, I want you to know that I wouldn't be doing this presentation unless there was quite a bit of evidence that these people are involved in something just as nefarious as what the Nazis had planned. So it isn't out of the realm of possibility. And in fact, when you get done listening to this, you're going to probably have a different opinion than what you had going in, because the evidence is pretty overwhelming. So what we're going to do is we're going to let's just start at the top. Who's the World Economic Forum? Well, the World Economic Forum was founded in 1971 by Klaus Schwab. And he had influence from a variety of people, but he's recognized as being the founder of it. David Rockefeller was very much involved. Maurice Strong, the godfather of global warming, was a very close associate, was involved with the forum for many, many years. And what they started off was this group of think tank, so to speak, a group of educated, powerfully connected, definitely wealthy, and certainly devious individuals getting together, plotting how they can help to manage the world. And by manage the world, they mean run the world. Now, you don't have to belong to just the World Economic Forum, or just Bilderberg, or just the United Nations. There's no rule in this club that says that you can't be members of all of them. And in fact, many people are. So there's a lot of overlap. If this were a Venn diagram of evil, you could have the World Economic Forum, and you could have the United Nations, and you could have Club of Rome, Bilderberg, Committee of 300. lot of overlap between all of these people here. So it's important that we know who we're dealing with. These are not altruistic, wealthy benefactors seeking to spread their money for the betterment of society. They'll tell you that they are, and that that's their mission, because you've got to have a cover story. Because if your slogan is World Economic Forum, we're here to run the world, maybe not the best. So they hide it. Of course, it's only hidden to the extent that you choose to look for it, because when you dig into it, even just a little bit, what you find is that these people have a plan for humanity, and it's not the sort of plan that you're going to want to go along with. So I've got 2 hours here tonight. I'm going to unpack this as in a detailed manner as best I can. It is not going to, I can't do it all in 2 hours. Okay. I recognize that there is quite a bit of information to get to, and we aren't going to be able to cover it all. But I'll tell you what, I'll do the best I can. I've got notes, and that's it's a good start for me. So look, let's start with this. Okay. The World Economic Forum, this is my thesis here. The World Economic Forum is creating the framework for a one world government with them and their partners in charge. Given their roots, influences, partners, and agenda, is the World Economic Forum's dream of the Fourth Industrial Revolution actually the reimagination of the Fourth Reich? So who's Klaus Schwab? He's the founder of it. He's every bit. I mean, his PR people need to pull him aside and say, look, this Emperor Palpatine fashion stage that you're going through, it's not a good look. I mean, you are an evil Bond villain, but could you tone it down a little bit, because it's a bit too on the nose. You kind of look a little bit too evil even for us. So let's start with the history of Klaus Schwab. He was born in 1938 in Switzerland to a father, Eugen Schwab, which I can only assume is short for eugenics Schwab. I don't know. Let's just assume that that's what it's for. He's a Swiss industrialist. He ran a company called Escher-Wyss, and that was a Swiss manufacturing facility that had a very deep partnership with the Nazis. And now I'm not trying to say that Klaus Schwab himself was a Nazi. He was born in 1938. The war had kicked off, right around that time. But his father, on the other hand, had very, very close ties with Adolf Hitler, with the entire Nazi regime. And the reason why they had those close ties was because the Nazi regime needed them desperately to make the sort of parts that Escher-Wyss made. So what did they make? Well, they made key nuclear bomb making technologies that Hitler was trying to perfect. Later, they wound up selling those nuclear bomb making technologies as they developed them and got better and better. They wound up selling them to South Africa. So the reason why South Africa has nukes is because of Escher-Wyss, Klaus Schwab's father's company. Now, he didn't own it. He ran, it's a 200-year-old company. It was started in 1805. So he didn't run it, but he managed it at the time. And later in life, Klaus Schwab would go, become older, go through all of the appropriate deep state schooling, and then come out and wind up running it himself for a little bit, doing some mergers and acquisitions, and before he wound up leaving to start the World Economic Forum. We'll get into that in a little bit. But one of the things that Escher-Wyss made for the Nazis were flamethrowers. So if you ever saw those World War II documentaries with Nazis with flamethrowers just going to town on people, that was made by Klaus Schwab's father's company. So if there's any question, like, well, I don't know, maybe he was a little connected to the Nazi. No. His company, Escher-Wyss, was described and was given the title of National Socialist Model Company. So in case there's any question, let's just settle that right now. They worked with the Nazis. Okay. you could, in theory, work with the Nazis without being a Nazi. You could. But I don't think that's what happened here. I don't think that you are that close of a partner. And later we'll get into a little bit more of what they had to do with regard to the Nazi gold. So, their involvement with the Third Reich was very detailed, extremely influential, extremely necessary for this German war machine. And he was treated as such. He was Reich royalty. So that's where we start. Okay. So we don't exactly start from the best place, but if you're trying to make connections between the fourth industrial revolution that the World Economic Forum is talking about and the remaking of the Third Reich into the Fourth Reich, you're not too far away when you're starting with a guy whose father was partnered with the Nazis himself. Now, again, that doesn't mean that Klaus Schwab is a Nazi himself. However, I think it's reasonable to suspect that some of that ideology that runs through a family, especially one like the Schwabs, could rub off on the kids. Okay. It's not to say that it does in every case on every child, but it could, much in the same way that William Gates Sr. was a deeply involved eugenicist working with Planned Parenthood. Of course, he worked with the Schwabs as well, but and then has a son, Bill Gates Jr., the one that we know, and he seems to follow in his father's footsteps of depopulation, birth reduction initiatives, vaccines, and all of that. So when it comes to these deep state families, they tend to fall in line. If they're going to go on to prominence, they tend to fall in line. If it's the one kid in the family that doesn't want to be like his dad, you never hear of him, right? They don't go on to start the World Economic Forum if they don't have that same sort of mentality. Klaus Schwab denies his biological mother, just doesn't talk about her. That's Emma Gisela Tiki Lise Schwab. And the reason he only mentions his stepmother, Erika Eprich. And part of the reason it is believed that he only mentions his stepmother and doesn't mention his actual mother is because his actual mother was Jewish. And his stepmother was like the master race, like full Aryan looking. Adolf Hitler would look at her and say, I like what you've done here, that sort of thing. Doesn't talk about the mother. So Escherwesch is known now after 200 years, a little over 215 years or so of being in service. It has gone through some changes in terms of mergers, acquisitions, name changes, the like. It's now known as Sulzer AG, Sulzer, and then the letters AG. Also, Andritz AG. This is, and what they do, just to give you diverge from generalities about being part of the Hitler war machine. They're deeply involved in building compressors, gas turbines, power generation, heat pumps, hydraulics, ships, hydroelectric power, and automation controls. So they do a lot of the stuff that's not very glamorous, but is really necessary when you're building the war machine. If you recall, if you've ever watched some, maybe slightly obscure World War II documentaries about how the Allies targeted a heavy water facility in Norway that was working to help create enriched uranium through this process. They needed this heavy water plant in Norway. Allied saboteurs wound up blowing the place up or compromising it in some way. That Norwegian heavy water treatment plant was built by Escherwesch. So this is the type of involvement that they have. They wasn't tangential. They were deeply involved with the Nazis. Okay. So anybody that wants to be dismissive of it and say, well, everybody was kind of forced to work with the Nazis. No. Don't allow them to go down that path. These guys were partners. That's what they did. They needed each other. One side needed the other to build machinery for them. The other side needed the Germans to not murder them. So they worked together. But I think ideologically, they were very similar. And the fact that they were located in Switzerland provided them with cover as well.